While some may have been wondering about the future of the Democratic Party in the wake of the 2016 election, there are rumblings of unrest within the conservative movement, too. The Heritage Foundation has more than 500,000 members and has been seen as an ally to President Trump and his still young administration. But the conservative group just ousted one of its highest profile leaders. Former South Carolina Senator Jim DeMint was removed from his post as Heritage Foundation president on Tuesday. And differing accounts of what actually went down have been leaking out of the think tank ever since. CBSN political contributor and Republican strategist Alex Conant joins me now for this week's Strat Chat. All right, Alex, so what do we know about what really went down behind the scenes to force DeMint out? And can you give us some background about why this move might make some conservatives worried?
Well, look, we don't know exactly what happened there. We should say at the outset, as you pointed out, there's been a lot of rumors, there's been a lot of speculation, there's been some reporting kind of around the edges around it. And if you listen to officials at Heritage, they will tell you it's all nothing to see here. Basically, this was just a classic management shift. They thought the place could be better managed. It had nothing to do with ideology or the direction of Heritage action. And that sort of holds with a lot of what I've been hearing as well. Jim DeMint, who's the outgoing president of Heritage, is very popular with conservatives in Washington, D.C. My former boss, I used to work for Marco Rubio. Marco says he wouldn't be in the U.S. Senate were it not for Jim DeMint. And I know for a fact that other senators, Republican senators, conservatives, feel the same way. So I think he remains popular, but the board at the Heritage Foundation wanted to make a change. They made a change, but I think it's too soon to say what comes next for either Heritage, let alone drawing larger conclusions about the shape of the Republican Party or the conservative movement moving forward.
Sounds like he's not just popular with some senators. President Trump gave him a shout out last week at an NRA rally. Let's take a quick listen.
And by the way, I want to thank really Heritage. And I want to thank also all of the people that worked with us. Where's Leo? Is Leo around here? Where is he? He's got to be here. Where is he? He has been so good. But and also from Heritage, Jim DeMint, it's been amazing.
The president called DeMint's work at Heritage amazing, as you just heard. So in his ouster, a sign that the think tank might be moving away from the Trump administration at all. Is that an indication? Can we draw that conclusion?
I don't think you can draw that conclusion. Look, it's a really awkward, forced marriage between President Donald Trump and the conservative movement. Many conservatives, people like the National Review, candidates like Ted Cruz, like I said, my former boss, Marco Rubio, I mean, they ran hard against Donald Trump. He was long from their first choice. And I think a lot of people at the Heritage Foundation would say the same, that Donald Trump was definitely not their first choice to be the Republican nominee. Everyone, I think, was surprised when he won this fall. But now we have a Republican president of the United States who's willing to sign into law big conservative pieces of legislation, including the bill that the House of Representatives passed today to repeal and replace Obamacare, a piece of legislation that the Heritage Foundation strongly supported. Many of the Heritage Foundation's ideas are in that legislation. So I think that the future of the Heritage Foundation is going to be closely linked to Donald Trump for the foreseeable future, because if they want any idea that they are putting out to become law in the next 3 or 4 years, Donald Trump is going to have to support it. They're going to have to work with the administration.
So let's talk about Thursday's health care vote, Alex. Republicans joined the president in the Rose Garden to celebrate. There are still many more steps that Congress needs to go through to get this bill fully passed, especially at the Senate level. It's going to be a much harder climb uphill with the Senate. This is certainly, no one should take anything away from the president and from Speaker Ryan, and this is a huge short-term win. But can the criticism be that they are patting themselves on the back a little too early?
Well, it's the end of the beginning, I think. And now they want to build some momentum going to what is arguably going to be a much harder phase, which is getting it through the Senate. So I think the event that we all saw in the Rose Garden today with the president and all those House members congratulating themselves, that was really directed to the U.S. Senate, saying, look, Trump and the House Republicans came together to get this done. Now the onus is on the Senate to take the next step, which we all acknowledge is going to be a difficult step. The bill that the House passed today will not become law in its current form. I can assure you that. The Senate has a real opportunity, I think, to improve that legislation, send it back to the House, and then onto the president's desk. That's a long process. But as you said, Vlad, I give credit to Trump and Speaker Ryan for taking that first step today.
Was it a mistake for them not to wait for that CBO score, Alex?
Well, I think they had the votes, so they took the vote. I think they could have waited a week, 2 weeks for the CBO score, which I think certainly some members would have felt better about that. They would have liked to have seen the CBO score. But at the end of the day, they knew they had the votes, and this process has been drawn out for months now. They wanted to move it along. And frankly, Vlad, they wanted to get it off their plates. I mean, the House of Representatives is sick of talking about health care, to forgive the pun. I mean, they're sick and tired of this. Like, for the first 110 odd days of the president's term now, every House member every day has been asked about health care. They want to move on to other stuff. They want to move on to tax reform. The only way to do that was vote yes today and get it off their plates, send it over to the Senate to deal with.
Absolutely. I mean, they have a huge legislative agenda, and this had been dominating the discussion for many, many weeks now. But there were 20 House Republicans, as you know, Alex, that didn't vote for the American Health Care Act. Do you think that if Donald Trump hadn't won the White House, we'd be talking more about the divides within the GOP instead of just in the Democratic Party?
Well, yes, obviously. Whenever you lose, then you talk about how your own party is all screwed up, which is why we're talking about with the Democrats. I was the RNC's press secretary in 2008 when we got, killed everywhere. And, I remember, doing the autopsy and spending months talking about the future of the Republican Party. And, lo and behold, 2 years later, we win the House, and 8 years later, we win the presidency. So, yes. If we had lost, there would be, we would be focused, we'd be talking about nothing but the divides inside the Republican Party. That said, as we were discussing earlier, this is a bit of an awkward marriage between conservatives and Donald Trump. Donald Trump, who is not of the conservative movement. He ran as a Republican, won the nomination, and I give him full credit for that. But he does not have a life of being a movement conservative like most members of the House are, for instance, or most members of the Senate are, for instance. So it remains a bit of an awkward marriage, and you see that in the debates where Donald Trump does not necessarily he wants a deal. He's not there fighting for one specific policy or the other. He wants to repeal and replace Obamacare, period. He doesn't care, I think, quite as much about the details as obviously some members of the House who originally voted against it and even today only passed it by 2 votes.
Right. And so that's my final question, I guess, Alex. If this bill never makes it to the desk of the President of the United States to sign, will there be some Republicans who say, you know what, I shouldn't have put my name to this because it was never going to get done?
No, I mean, I think Republicans have promised their constituents, have promised their base for 8 years now, 7 years now, that they were going to repeal and replace Obamacare if they were ever back in power. So I think that they had to move forward. They had to show a full faith effort. If it doesn't pass, look, America's healthcare system has a lot of problems. And the bill that they passed today, I think even House Republicans would acknowledge this does not solve all of the problems. In fact, even if we pass this, they're going to want to do more things. This is one of many phases of reforms that they want to pass when it comes to healthcare reform. And so I think that, in some ways, if it goes all the way through, then Republicans are going to end up owning healthcare. And people are still not going to necessarily be happy with their healthcare system. So there is real political risk in passing this legislation, just as there's real political risk in not passing this legislation. I think today they decisively decided we owe it to the people that we promised that we would do this to vote yes and at least move it on to the Senate, and we can go from there.
All right, Republican strategist Alex Conant in Washington. As always, my friend, we appreciate the insight.
Great seeing you, Vlad.